Hello, everyone. It's nice to have you all with us today. I'm going to introduce Debbie Creba, who is a childcare specialist and has 18 years experience doing different roles within the childcare sector. For example, she did some Sure Start work, working with children with very special needs, support guidance on breastfeeding and sleep training, even counseling, multiple births, and lots more. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we'll have Debbie speaking to us about specifically what happens in the first 6 weeks of having a baby. We'll have some questions if you have any, and just to let you know that I know Debbie personally, and she has helped me with all 3 of my children, now 7, 6 and 1, or 16 months. So welcome, Debbie, and thank you so much for your time. And you can introduce yourself too.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's actually quite exciting. The first 6 weeks are extremely hard, but very exciting. But right from the onset, I want to just, my encouragement would be that you don't let the journey ahead overwhelm you. Just focus on one day at a time, on getting to know your baby, as well as letting your body physically heal and rest, and with good nutrition, and mentally adjust to less sleep whilst you are caring for this precious human who's now dependent on you. So that's my encouragement. Take one day at a time. The other important thing is to note is also that every baby is different. Every parent's journey is different, and every cultural postnatally is different. So it's very important that we try and not compare our journey to other parents' journeys, not compare our babies to other babies, because ultimately this is not good for you or for your baby. So at the very onset, I want to say to you guys, please be kind to yourself and please be kind to others. Yeah, it's a journey that it's an exciting journey ahead. So please feel free to ask questions in between, or if you want to jot them down, we can do our Q&A at the end. Hopefully I can cover everything in this period, but if I don't, we'll answer the questions afterwards.
I'll make a note as well of some questions so that we can either add in as you're talking, Debbie, or we can answer them towards the end. So
all right. Okay. All right. No, that's great. One thing I want to start off with is breastfeeding. Now, for me, breastfeeding is it's such a special time of this connection between you and this new little human. But I want to just say one word, and I've learned this years ago, and that was you need to keep the breast a happy place. If you don't keep that a happy place and it becomes stressful, then actually you need to reevaluate of where it is going wrong. Because the moment that breastfeeding becomes stressful, then it's not number one, what it does, it'll start drying your milk up. And number 2, it's not great because your cortisol levels will be high, and that means baby's cortisol levels will be high, and then breastfeeding does not become a happy place. So it's important from the beginning, right from the beginning, that you set realistic expectations for yourself on breastfeeding. Now, it can be very hard. And Krieber will agree with me. It's not those first 2 weeks of breastfeeding. It's a massive learning curve, and it's very difficult. But if you have the right support system in place, for instance, if you are thinking of breastfeeding, go online and have a look at Dr. Jack Newman's videos. He's a specialist in actual breastfeeding, we study his work. We've studied his work over years, and that'll show you how to latch and attach babies and everything. And the other thing is you can take breastfeeding classes. You can, when you're in the hospital after baby's been born, you can ask your midwife or your lactation nurse to actually help you latch baby, show you different feeding positions. all that before you actually bring baby home, or you can employ a maternity nurse or a doula or a breastfeeding consultant. But it's very important that you actually make sure that you've got all these names and these details of people that could help you if you are struggling, so that again you keep the breast a happy place. The first thing to do with breastfeeding is that first hour after birth, and we call it the golden hour. And this is the moment baby is born and they've placed it on top of you, and you have this uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact with baby. And when you have this uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact, what happens is it actually helps initiate breastfeeding, number one, but it also helps regulate mothers' and baby's temperature. It helps regulate their blood glucose level, as well as it helps them regulates their heart rate and their breathing. So that first hour is so crucial after baby's born. Now, if you've had an emergency, had to be rushed back to theatre, and you cannot do skin to skin, let your partner do it. Let them do the skin to skin contact. It's just as important, because it'll do exactly the same. It regulates their temperature and regulates their blood glucose and everything. And then as soon as, if you have had to go to theatre, you will then note that you can then put baby straight onto the breast. And then, of course, everyone in your antenatal classes and that, you'll learn about colostrum. Now, the colostrum is what we call, so we have the golden hour, and then we have our liquid gold. And of course, colostrum is our liquid gold. It starts getting produced a few weeks before baby's birth, and then it is a few weeks, for a few days after birth. And now colostrum, there's a new school of thought that you can actually harvest colostrum. So from about 36 weeks, you can do hand expressions, and you can start harvesting colostrum in colostrum kits. It's a syringe where you put your colostrum and you can freeze that. So some moms do that because they, just in case something has gone wrong. It's almost like a preventative thing. But still, we say breast is best. That's skin to skin contact. But you can do it. So if you've heard about colostrum harvesting, you can do it. And you give it to the baby in the syringe, and you do drip to drip, feed them. That's how you actually administer the colostrum. So colostrum has great benefits, and one of the greatest benefits is that it helps to line the gastrointestinal tract, and it serves as a protection for diseases and illnesses. It helps prevent jaundice, and then of course the great thing about colostrum is that it actually is a laxative. And that's what actually makes your baby have the first poo, the meconium poo, which is this thick tar-like substance. So colostrum has really great benefits. Now, in all the years I've been working, one of the big questions moms always ask me is, will they have enough milk to feed their babies? And I would say, of course, because even though it comes in small quantities, colostrum, it's so nutrient dense that it's actually perfect for what they need. And bear in mind that a baby's tummy the first 3 days are only the size of a chickpea. So they don't need these huge amounts of milk. They need it more frequently. So you'll be feeding a lot during the day, but they actually have the perfect amount. So the other thing is, moms say to me, well, how long do I feed them for? So, well, for day one, I would suggest you feed them anywhere between from 2 hourly to 3.5, 4 hourly. Again, it all depends on the size of your baby. And then you do that throughout the whole day. So it's almost like demand feeding. You do that again in day 2. And then, of course, day 3 your milk comes in, and then you can start feeding 3 hourly. And then day 4, again, 3 hourly. And then day 5, your midwife will come around to you. She will weigh baby, sorry. And then when the baby is back up to its birth weight, then you can actually continue to feed 3 hourly. which is quite important. So your milk will be in, they'll be back up to their birth weight, and you'll be able to feed them every 3 hours. Now, saying that, if they come and weigh the baby and it's not up to its birth weight, you'll be then asked by your midwife to feed them every 2 to 2.5 hours, so that they can actually get enough nutrient quantity to actually put them back up to their birth weight. So that's quite important. That I always say that those first few days are actually quite important, because we have to get the baby, or first few weeks, sometimes it takes the baby up to 14 days until they're back up to their birth weight. So it's very important that we demand feed, that we feed them regularly, we're watching out for their sleep cues, etc. So another thing a lot of parents ask me is, so what will my feed look like? What does a feed look like? So the first thing is, I love to tell parents, narrate your feed. So for instance, you've got baby's giving you all the the feeding cues. They suck in their fingers, they put in their fist in their mouth, they're rooting with their neck, and it's time for them to get fed. So what you do is you say to yourself, this is narrating your own feed. You say, am I sitting up straight? It's very important to sit up straight. Have I got cushions behind me? And then, of course, the next big question, is the baby latched on properly? So is the baby's mouth quite wide? Does it look like a fish? It's got to be wide. Has the baby got, has the baby got most of the areola? Doesn't have to have all of the areola, but does it have most of the areola in its mouth? Then you say to yourself, is the cheeks like this, puffed up? Because that means that they actually they've got a proper latch. If they are sucked in like this, it means they actually have a shallow latch, and the sucking is not growing. They will not be able to get enough food out. The other thing is, if they are making a clicking noise, then they're also not latched on properly. So you can ask yourself all of these questions. And then the other thing is my nipple sore? If your nipple is sore, you need to delatch your baby straight away. So those are the questions that you can ask yourself straight away. And then what you do is, once you've sat up properly, baby's latched on properly, you're now comfortable. Yes, it'll start being a little bit sensitive in the beginning when baby's latched on, but after that, you shouldn't have any more pain. Then what you do is you let babies feed for 20 minutes on the one side, and then after 20 minutes, babies will have fallen asleep. You take them off, you wind them a little bit, you change their bottoms, wake them up, and then put them on the opposite side and feed them for another 20 minutes. And so you have 20 minutes on the one, 20 minutes on the other, and of course the 10, 15 minutes in between of changing the bum and everything. So that's what it looks like. Now, some moms have come to me and said to me, Debbie, actually, I was in hospital and I let the baby suck off me for 2 hours. Now, that's too long. Number one, if you've just had the baby and it's sucked off you, your nipples are going to be raw and they will be very tender. So just to start off with, it's always important, narrate your feed. Give them 20 minutes on the side, it's anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes on that side, wind and change bum and put on the opposite side. Okay, so that's quite an important thing, is always narrate your feed. Some fun facts. Sometimes if you've hand expressed some breast milk, you'll notice that that's either orange, green, or even pink. And that's got a lot to do with you as moms and what you're actually drinking. So for instance, or eating, actually, if you've had beetroot, or if you've had carrots, or if you've had lots of spinach, and there's nothing to worry about that. That's just what actually happens. It's just it comes through your milk supply. So carry on breastfeeding. Of course, if it carries on like that, you do need to, chat to your midwife about it, but normally it's food related. Another interesting fact is the fact that if you your food, what your baby will taste, whatever food you ingesting. So for instance, if you enjoy vegetarian food or spicy food or rich food, that baby will actually be tasting all that, and it's actually very, really helpful for them, because then they start to become familiar with what foods that are usually eaten within the family. So don't change your diet just, once you've had a baby, you carry on. The other thing is that when you start exercising again at 6 weeks, when you start exercising lactic acid, you start producing lactic acid, and that changes the taste of the breast milk as well. So sometimes you'll find babies will want to pull off because, oh, they go, oh my gosh, what's that taste? But that's absolutely fine. It's because you're exercising. So then what you need to do is just persist, carry on with breastfeeding. They'll get used to that taste. Now, I've studied epigenetics, and one of the most interesting facts for me is the fact that a mum's milk reflects her lifelong history of exposures to pathogens, and they transfer this immune memory to your child. So all your life, all the pathogens that you've ingested and everything, and all the diseases and all the illnesses that you have, it actually stored up in your memory, and you transfer that to your baby when you breastfeed. And so it's actually quite a special process, breastfeeding. The other thing that's really remarkable is that on your areola, you have many Montgomery glands. And the Montgomery glands, what it does is when the baby latches on, they produce quite a lot of saliva. But now saliva is very important, because what the Montgomery glands do is that they actually take some of those substances from the saliva, and they take it back into their breast. And then what happens is it tells the mom if the baby has come into any contact with any viruses, and it actually tailor-mades the right antibodies that baby will need to recover. So if you've got visiting friends that have come in with a snuffy nose or whatever to visit your baby, so if you're breastfeeding, there's a protective element there, because your body will then produce the right antibodies for your specific baby. So again, remember, keep your breast a happy place.
We've got a couple of questions with regards to breastfeeding. We can continue, and then before we move on, we can. Angie, I just want to say welcome to the webinar, and I hope you find this useful and informative. And for your first 6 weeks after having a baby, everything that you're doing it's hard, but it's special. So stick with it, and we'll always be here to help in any way that we can. So I've got a question. One was, do you have any particular food items with regards to breastfeeding specifically? So, to promote milk production in those first few weeks.
Okay, so for instance, if you have a low milk supply, okay, what I would encourage you to have is take fenugreek tablets and blessed thistle tablets. You take both of those capsules together. So you take 3 fenugreek and 3 blessed thistle, and you take those 3 times a day. And that actually will help within milk production. The other thing, which is you can make lactation cookies. Lactation cookies are full of oats and brewer's yeast, and also it has all nuts and all that, and that's great. So those are snacky things that you can eat. But as well, the other thing is, which I love using, which Krieber herself has had the privilege of tasting, is jungle juice. And jungle juice is fantastic because what it does is makes you drink 3 liters of water, 3 liters of water a day, which is what you need to consume in order to breastfeed. And so jungle juice is made up of Weleda Elixir Blackthorn Tonic, Diarylite, and then you put 1 liter of orange juice, and then you put 2 liters of water. You mix it all together. You have a couple of tablespoons of the Weleda tonic, and you need to drink that 3 liters in 1 24-hour period, and of course make fresh the next day. The important thing to remember is that the moment you got your milk supply, you can stop that. You can carry on using it, but if once you've got a good supply of milk, you don't have to use it.
I love that elixir. I thought it was lovely. I used to have it with hot water, and I do remember actually when I was breastfeeding, was I always needed something next to me in terms of a drink, because I think you do get thirsty, but I think equally the more you drink, the more hydrated, and I guess the more milk that
And I think for me, the very important thing is if you have your breastfeeding, if you have a support system, so, it says it takes a village to raise a family. So if you have, for instance, your grandparents, or you've got a maternity nurse or a doula or whoever else is helping support you, they can actually set a tray out for you every single morning with water, with the jungle juice, or if you need the jungle juice, but snacks and all those. And that's quite an important thing, because when you are breastfeeding, you do get thirsty and hungry. So that is actually quite important.
And Andrew's asked a question, and he says, is it, no, sorry, I'm just going to scroll down. She says, what if my baby only wants to eat for 10 minutes on one side and refuses to eat again, even after switching the breast?
Okay, so how old's the baby?
I'm not sure.
Sorry, it's about, he's 4 weeks.
He's 4 weeks. Okay, so Angie, can I ask you a question? How, when he was born, how long was he feeding off both sides for?
He's gone through different phases. So he's gone from about sort of average of like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, then down to like 10 minutes. So now he's kind of like feeding every hour and a half.
Okay.
But then much shorter. So each time is about sort of 10 minutes on average.
So he's 4 weeks old, and he's feeding every hour and a half.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so the thing is, at 4.5, what is his weight?
He's the last time he got weighed, and that was around 2 weeks. He was 3.6.
It was 3.6 when he was
2 weeks.
2 weeks old. And so, okay, two things. First of all, I'd like you to get him reweighed.
Okay.
And that's quite an important thing, because we can find out once that they've been reweighed exactly if they are getting enough. Now, some babies actually do only feed for 10 minutes, but that's actually normally quite a few weeks down the line. So, and I do understand what you're saying, they fall asleep, but what I would do, have you taken off all his clothes?
Yeah, I've tried that as well.
Okay, so you've taken his clothes off, you've changed his bum and everything, and he still falls asleep.
Yeah, he does.
Do you have your milk supply? Do you have a full milk supply?
Yeah, I do have quite a bit of letdown as well, so I don't think it's a supply problem.
Okay, so
the only thing is that he's got a tongue tie, so I don't know if that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. So how did you discover he had a tongue tie? Have you had it checked
we
out?
had a midwife, and we had the lactation consultant to look at him.
Okay, so are you going to have the frenulum cut?
Yeah, we've got that scheduled next week. But it's just getting pretty difficult, because he's literally like asking for food like around the clock.
Yeah, no, and and I feel for you, because at 4 weeks they should be going for 3 hourly. They should be only being fed every 3 hourly. So my encouragement would be to get him weighed, because we need to find out what his weight is. And the other thing is, he needs the frenulum cut. And once he's had that cut, you should find a huge difference. But unfortunately, until you've had that cut, it's going to be very difficult, because what he's doing with the tongue tie, he's actually not extracting the amount of milk. He's not giving you the latch that you actually need.
Got it. So I guess we're just fingers crossed that it gets better.
Yeah, and you know what, you can always contact us, and we will, we can walk through it with you, and we can help you. But I think for me, the big thing is get the frenulum cut, and then, because we need to then transition him once we find out his weight, that he needs to be fed every 3 hourly.
Got it. Thanks for that.
It's a pleasure. Okay, any other questions, Cribs?
So some of this, I don't know, with regards to lactation and adequate milk production, apart from proper latching on, is there anything I can do on my own? Any exercise or diet? We talked about diet, but any exercises or anything like that? personally just think that when you say exercise in those first 6 weeks, there is absolutely no energy for anything else. I think just from my own experience, just the level of stress and pressure you put on yourself, thinking that you're not doing the best thing for your baby, and it's really hard if they are waking up every so often to feed and you think you're not giving enough, is just stick with it because you know your baby best. But yeah, I don't know, Debbie, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
So are you talking about exercising physically, a physical exercise? Yeah, well, actually for me, the first 2 weeks are actually, it's so difficult, as Krieber will tell you, the first 2 weeks are not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that they're easy because they're not. But what I would encourage you to do, if you haven't had a C-section, or even if you've had a C-section, why don't you go for a walk for 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Don't overstretch it, or, don't ever push it. But actually for 10 minutes, actually, it's amazing. That would actually do you the world of good. So I think that's put baby in the pram and just go for a walk. I think that's the some amount that you can do if you've had a C-section. Really, the rest of the time you don't have the energy, don't push it at the moment.
Yeah. And the other thing with regards to that is obviously, it's easy to develop things like mastitis even as early on as that, for whatever reason, if the baby's not feeding or your production is a lot and whatever. So what are the first signs of mastitis, and what do you do if you
when you get mastitis? What actually happens is your boobs are, but normally what you would actually have, you would have to have an engorgement first, which means your baby's actually not sucking, not latched on properly, so they're not actually extracting the milk. One thing I do want to mention is that you'll produce a huge amount of milk if the baby extracts all the milk. If the baby isn't extracting all the milk, number one, your supply will be reduced, but also at the same time, you'll get an engorgement. If you do get an engorgement, which is your boobs are incredibly rock hard, you need to still latch the baby. And while they're latched on, you can massage where the lump is. Okay. And then the other thing is you get warm flannels, put warm flannels on so that it actually can help release, but nothing else, no pumping. Don't try overdo anything in the first 6 weeks with regard to doing that. With mastitis, what happens with mastitis, your boob becomes really warm and hot. You get this massive red mark that appears, and then what I would suggest is take a marker, like a pen marker, and then actually draw around where the mark is. And if it gets worse, and then you start to run a temperature, you start to have aches all over your body, you almost get like flu-like symptoms, you need to see your GP straight away, because the only way they can sort that out is by giving you an antibiotic. Now, most important thing is you still have to breastfeed when you have mastitis. It's very painful, but some girls I've worked with have mastitis about 5 times, but unfortunately that normally is down to because they've got a huge supply. So what we do in those situations is we take off the quite a bit of the milk to start off with, and then we latch the baby on. That can also help Angie actually, once the baby, if she's got a large supply, what she can actually do is she can take off a little bit of the fore milk. So take a little bit of
Debbie, can you remember that contraption that you gave
the
me?
the haka. You can use the haka. The only problem is when you've got a large supply, you got your milk, it's quite difficult to put the haka on, because it's almost like you're telling your body to make more milk. Okay. So what I would do in that situation is just put warm flannels on, lean over the bath, do some hand compressions just to release a little bit of the milk off. Some girls that have it's just very difficult to use the haka because it actually makes you stimulate so you have more milk.
Okay. And just to reiterate, we're saying definitely no expressing in those first 6 weeks.
No, I don't think so. Look, for me, the thing is sometimes the first 3 to 4 weeks, it's very important that you're with your baby, that you're actually encouraging them to actually suck and extract. I mean, I have had lots of moms that actually really they're determined to express at 4 weeks. So then what we actually would then encourage you to do is at night only to actually take only for 5 minutes and to pump. That's it. but really not to express until 6 weeks.
It's really hard. It's very tempting, because even for, say, somebody like Andrew saying, I've only been there for 10 minutes, you can think that the baby's not getting enough, but it's one of those things. You think it will help, but it can make it worse.
It can make it worse.
I've got another question here. With regards to delatching, what's the best way to delatch the baby? I know I've got caught sometimes when you try to take the baby off, and it can be quite sore. So
okay, so let me see. This is my breastfeeding baby. It's actually my granddaughter's baby, but anyway. So when baby is, can you see baby there? So the thing is, what you do is you take your finger and you put it in on the side, and you put your finger in on the side of their mouth like that to actually delatch them. Because if you don't and you pull them off, you will damage your nipple. So be very careful how you delatch. Make sure in and then pull them off.
And earlier you said skin to skin. Even in the 6 weeks, you said most importantly after the baby's first born. But I do think that also throughout those first 6 weeks as well, as much of the skin to skin that they can get is hugely beneficial, whether it's mum or dad. I think
it's very important, because I think for me, what happens is sometimes, you come home with this little baby, and then, 2 weeks down the line, and you've got this unsettled baby. And I always use skin to skin with an unsettled baby, because it's amazing. And then what I say is, moms, hold the baby, take 5 deep breaths in, 5 deep breaths out. And as you regulate your heartbeat, baby's heartbeat will come down. And the other thing is, you hold them in there. So you're holding them and you're going shh very loudly. People say that's too loud. Well, actually, in utero, the water and the swishing around is so loud anyway. Bless you. Shh. And then, of course, holding them skin to skin. It's very important. It brings down their cortisol levels, skin to skin.
Yeah, I always remember, Deborah, you said that what they hear the loudest is the mother's heartbeat. And so when you do feel anxious, when you do feel stressed, it changes the rate, your heart rate, and that is what the baby goes on. So, when in your times of stress and all the rest of it, is just remember that can also not help the baby, because what they're going on is the heart rate. So,
and I think it's also very important, we're talking about breastfeeding and everything, but I think it's and there's a lot of the NHS has incredible guidelines with breastfeeding, and they have safe sleep. Please, I'd encourage you to go online and have a look at their safe sleeping and everything. It's really important with all that, with breastfeeding and everything. There's guidelines, so do read that. But I just want to encourage you, if you aren't breastfeeding and for any other reason things haven't worked out and you are bottle feeding, please don't feel guilty about it. My son was born and I was all keen on doing breastfeeding, and then within a week I hemorrhaged and I had to be rushed back into hospital to have an operation. And I came out and the anaesthetist told me I would never be able to breastfeed, and I still was determined 4 weeks later. But this poor kid wasn't growing, and eventually I put him on breast milk, and it took me a long time to get over because I was so guilty about it. But you know what? As long as your baby is fed, that's the most important thing. So fed is best. Yes, breast is best, but let's just get down to it. Fed is best. So if you are going down the formula feeding route, sorry, always use the first formula, okay? And the biggest thing is how you clean and sterilize your bottles and how you actually prepare the formula. Again, the guidelines, NHS guidelines, are very clear on how you do it. Shell Banks writes the NHS, the NICE guidelines, sorry. She's a great breastfeeding lactation consultant. I've studied with her, and she actually, it's very important. If you don't clean and sterilize those bottles properly, it can cause gut bacteria in your baby. So for instance, wash them, clean, make sure everything's sterilized, clean the teats, everything. You can boil them for 5 minutes, or you can actually put them in your sterilizing unit. But please, if you're going to go down that route with bottle feeding, please make sure that you clean and prepare the bottles really well. The other thing is that when you are formula feeding, it's actually easier to overfeed a baby, and our rates of obesity can be actually related to the way how much we've actually fed our baby. And so just don't overfeed them. Just because they're finished doesn't mean to say that they need to have, if they've already had their quota, yes, they may need a little bit more, but there is this whole thing of actually I need to feed them more. And that's when they get more wind, they get more stomach ache. So just be careful about the way that they're feeding. The other thing that's quite important is the way you wind. And I get this question asked all the time from me. Is winding important? Let's just put it this way. All you need to do for the first 6 weeks is feeding, winding. It's the most irritating thing. Parents come back and tell me, they say, Debbie, if you had told me how much winding I have to do, I don't know. I would have thought twice about having a baby.
I remember with winding, Debbie, it was wind, keep doing it, and then a little bit more, because it's that little bit more is when the wind actually comes out, by which time you think you've done it all, you've spent as much time, and this baby isn't going to wind, but it ends up winding at that time.
So it's actually quite, what happens is a great way of winding. Okay, so you've got baby. If you put them on here, the right collarbone, so here's your collarbone, put baby up here, and you put them on an angle so that they're coming down here into the middle of, so in actual fact it's almost like their left side, which is where all your intestinal tract is running, and all you do is you hold them and you can pat them. Sometimes you don't even need to pat them. Now this is a fantastic technique, but there are times where it does actually nothing. So then of course you would hold them upright. They will show, you sit upright like this, you hold them, and you can pat them, or you can you can lie them down first. This baby's not very pliable, but anyway, you hold them first, you can lie them down, and then after you can lift them up, and that actually sometimes releases a burp as well. But
moving their legs around a little bit.
You can when they you can again in a clockwise position, and then you can do bicycle kicks as well, slowly, because remember their bones are still very soft, and you just do it slowly. So unfortunately sometimes one technique won't work, so you need to actually do quite a few of the winding positions. Tiger in the tree, tapping on the back. But try that position first. Put baby up here to your collarbone, slanting on an angle, and hold them and see if that won't actually release it.
I feel sometimes also, Debbie, breastfeeding is so individualistic. It depends on the mum, it depends on the baby. So we don't have any more questions with regard to that. So I think we can probably move on to sleeping. Just so that if people have any specific questions with regard to that, then we've kind of covered at least two big things in that first 6 weeks. And then if anyone has any questions at the end, 5 minutes, we can leave that. But I thought sleeping is also equally important, and we can cover co-sleeping and everything else as well. So maybe we can move on to the sleeping. Do you want to have that slide up as well?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
Now, for me, I love talking about sleeping, so maybe Krieber will have to stop me halfway. But anyway, so newborn sleep for me, I find if you want to have a baby that sleeps really well, you need to actually do the fundamentals in the beginning really well. So there's a school of thought that you can actually let a baby sleep from day 3. That's nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. A baby's tummy on day 3 is actually still the size between a chickpea and a cherry. So they won't be, because they need that replenished all the time. So they can't do that. So let's get back to this. The most thing is when a baby is in utero, they actually follow your circadian rhythm, your 24-hour biological clock. So for instance, when you're awake, they're awake because they've got your cortisol level, because the cortisol and the melatonin is being directly passed through via the placenta. And so their biological clock is actually attached to yours. So when you go to sleep, your cortisol level's low, they go to sleep. But after the baby is born, that connection is severed. And then what happens is they have to learn to have their own biological clock, and they have to learn the difference between day and night. And the thing is that it's very difficult. In those first few weeks, they muddle everything up. They eat, they randomly sleep at different times, they randomly eat at different times. So in those first three to 4 months, they don't have a circadian rhythm of their own. So one way in which we can actually help them is by exposing them to natural light. So for instance, putting them in a pram, going for a walk, putting them in a sling. So nothing too heavy, but you're just slowly teaching them the difference between day and night, which helps.
So that even in your room is opening the curtains
exactly
in the morning and putting down the curtains,
yes.
even though they say that they haven't developed their
yeah.
eyesight fully or whatever, but all of that is very important from day
very
one.
important, the difference between day and night. The other way in which you can do it is carry on letting them hear the hustle and bustle of the home, letting them hear the house being cleaned, letting them hear the noises, if you've got older kids, of the other kids making noises. And the other important thing is by reducing the noises at night time. So just very light things, you know, in the beginning, the first 6 weeks, nothing too stressful, but you slowly are helping them. And then from about week 3, you can throw in baby massage at night. It's almost like gearing towards putting into a routine. As they're hitting towards 3 months, you want them to be able to know that there's a routine coming, but you're preparing them. And of course, breastfeeding helps with it as well, because what happens is breastfeeding contains tryptophan, and tryptophan is an amino acid which actually helps make melatonin, and it helps regulate your sleep. And of course, what happens is if mom feeds at nighttime, your melatonin's low, so it actually helps the baby sleep at night as well. So breastfeeding, that's a great tip. If you only want to breastfeed at night, breastfeed once or twice a day, breastfeed at night, because it actually contains a tryptophan. The other thing is that babies, we've got to try and get babies into some sort of a rhythm, okay? And if some parents get a bit too they want to get their sleep back, but your sleep is never going to come back for a while. So newborns normally sleep between 16 to 19 hours per 24-hour period. Okay, so it's very important that they sleep, because it's where they consolidate memories. They have they can either be in a good mood or a bad mood, so it's important that you let them sleep. And like many parents say to me, well, Debbie, I'm going to keep this little thing up the whole day because I want to sleep at night. Well, actually, that doesn't actually work, because if you keep them up, you're going to have a very overstimulated baby, very unsettled, cranky, and that's no good for your own bonding with the baby. Number one, it causes havoc in relationships, because the baby's not sleeping because you've made them overtired, because you've missed their sleep cues. So in actual fact, it has a negative effect. So the first 6 weeks, it's very important that you let them sleep, feed, poo, and sleep. All babies are interested in the first 6 weeks is their tummy. They want food, and they want to feed, and they want to sleep. So it varies. Sometimes after a feed, they can be awake for about 30 minutes. And then the moment after 30 minutes, they start either rubbing their eyes, they actually yawn. The moment they yawn once, you swaddle them, and you put them to sleep straight away. So what happens with sleep deprivation with a baby is that, or an overstimulated baby, their cortisol level is so high that they can't sleep.
And so, just with the swaddling, Debbie,
yeah,
to swaddle, not to swaddle, there's so many things on that.
You know, at the moment, there is a lot of stuff. And I think for me, the big thing is swaddling has been, I use swaddling. And swaddling for me is actually quite important. As long as you're not making it so tight around the hips that you're causing the hips to have hip dysplasia or anything like that. But a good swaddle is great, because remember, babies have this moron reflex in the beginning, so that they jerk, and that's so when they sleeping, they actually jerk backwards, which wakes them up. So actually put that slide on, that slide I want that I've sent.
Whilst that's coming on, also what you should put the baby in. So at this time of the year, how many layers, including the swaddle? I mean, I know when I had my last one, it was August and we had that heat wave. I think Ray spent the first 6 weeks in just a nappy, almost with just a muslin over her, because it was so hot. But for this time of the year, what would you recommend?
I would definitely put a vest on, a baby grow, and then the swaddle. And please, no hats
of the room.
It must be, it can be between 90, you can put it between 19 and 21 degrees. But the most important thing is no hats. Please, no hats on their babies, no extra blankets. If your babies are premature, that's different, and you'll get the guidelines from the neonatal unit. But try it, yeah. So that's the most important, is the fact is you don't overheat. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What I've got up here is that this is a baby sleep cycle. Now, babies from 0 to 4 months, they have the sleep cycle of between 45 minutes and 50 minutes, and they move through these sleep cycles about 5 times a night. Okay, so what happens is that you fed baby, you've burped baby, you've burped baby, you've burped baby, and you've changed its bum, and now it's ready to go to sleep. So what happens is you wrap them up and you hold them. So the first 10 minutes, because that's gone off. Can you still see that?
Can we share it again?
So, okay, so for the first 10 minutes,
yeah, there we go.
Okay, so for the first 10 minutes, they start to fall asleep. Now, when they start to fall asleep, their eyelids start to go like this. They flutter, and they all roll back, and they jerk, which is that reflex. They jerk. So that's why I'm saying swaddle, because it makes them feel secure, just exactly like they were in utero. And then what they do is their heart rate actually is quite high, and they move and they wriggle, but just hold them and just shh them for the first 10 minutes. And then after the first 10 minutes, you'll notice that as it's going past the first 10 minutes, they start getting into a deeper sleep. So so what happens is when they're in those first 10 minutes, we call it REM sleep, which is your rapid eye movement. But now the interesting fact is that babies need that first sleep, because that's the first sleep where they actually, it's for their cognitive and their physical skills development. It's mentally restorative. And so it's actually very important that babies have that light sleep. And then when they're going into, so you've had them for 10 minutes, they're slowly starting to go into their deep sleep after 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, between 20 to 30 minutes, what happens is their breathing becomes, it drops down. They stop jerking. Everything starts to relax. And in this period, what's great is that you can actually put them down. You wrap them up and you put them down. Now, non-rapid eye movement is actually important for growth and hormonal repair. And what also does, it actually helps the blood vessels, or blood is released into the muscles, specifically for tissue and growth repair. Okay, so that's quite an important process. And then once, you'll notice after about 30 minutes, all of a sudden, 30, 40 minutes, you'll start seeing they're coming out of their heavy sleep. And then as they're heading towards 40, 45 minutes, all of a sudden you'll hear this noise. They'll start fidgeting, they'll moan, they grunt, they squeak. It's all like a farmyard all in once, especially at night. They start to wheeze. It's almost like they're starting to wake up. And I actually say to parents, leave them alone. Do not pick them up, because what happens is if you go while they're coming out of their deep sleep, going into their light sleep, you actually then go, oh, they're waking up, and you go and pick them up. In actual fact, you need to leave them for a couple of minutes, because you'll notice that they're heading then back into the next sleep cycle, and they'll naturally go back. So it's actually quite important that you actually you don't disturb them, because what we're preparing for is we're preparing for when they hit the 4-month mark, which is when they then have longer sleep cycles of every 90 minutes, that the same as us as adults, that they aren't going to be disturbed. So if you lie next to them in the middle of the night and all of a sudden you're hearing these grunting noises and that, just stay in your bed for a while, because all they may be doing is just actually going through from their deep sleep into their light sleep. You can take that off now.
Also with the sleep, Debbie, I remember I want my kids into a routine. And I just remember actually with all 3 of them, I think Ray, the youngest, was the one who probably fell into a sleep cycle the quickest. But it's so easy to put that pressure on yourself. But again, some babies take longer, some don't. And it's just one of those things. As much as you say that this should happen at this point in time, I guess it's just when the baby decides that that's what's going on. But it's a lot of things coupled together that will ensure that the baby sleeps for longer, is being fed and whatever. So just on that, and then I'm going to add on another question for that. Is a lot of people say that when the baby sleeps, you sleep, but I also find that quite impossible to do, because when the baby sleeps, you think, well, I'm going to put the washing on and make some food, I'll have a cup of tea, or whatever, and by the time you've made the tea and you're just about to take the first sip, the baby's screaming again. So all of that can be a real juggle in those first 6 weeks. So when we talk about all of that together, what would you say?
I think it's very important that Krieber, because I think what happens is, I always say you need to give yourself a break for the first 6 weeks, because for me, it's actually, you both are learning about each other. And you may have one baby, you may have twins or triplets, and so it's actually quite important that you take one day at a time. And so, for instance, I chat to a lot of moms, and they say, I don't sleep. I do not sleep during the day. But in actual fact, and I've told this to Krieber before, even if you lie down on the bed or lie down on the sofa and you actually just rest for 20 minutes, I guarantee you will fall asleep. But the most important thing is that you are resting. You need to rest, which is, again, let's bring it back to, if you don't have a support village to help you, your husband, if they put the tray of all the goodies next to, in the lounge or wherever, then what actually happens is, if you can have those snacks and everything next to you. So you're resting. So you are actually doing that. The other thing is, we put too much pressure on putting our babies into a routine. And it's very difficult, because babies do their own thing. In the first few weeks, they nap, as I've said before. They nap when they want to. They feed when they want to. So it's very difficult to try and put them into a routine before 6 weeks.
Okay. I'm going to try and wrap up if we can. Angie and all the other participants, if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to, I think you might have an email address or whatever, and we can see all topics that you suggest that you might want to discuss or hear about next time. We're going to see if we can do another webinar, January, late January or February. But if there's anything like that, please get in touch. All your suggestions will be heard, and it's actually a good guidance for us. But Debbie, what is the role of a partner in that first 6 weeks? Because obviously you're feeding, you're doing everything as a mother, but I think it's equally important for the partner to be involved at that stage as well. And I remember you were working with a family, and the husbands or the partners feel, there you go. So just actually, on that quickly.
Yeah, so actually, I actually sent an email and text to all my previous dads. Not all of them answered back, but some of them. I asked them, I said to them, what have you found the hardest? And it was actually quite interesting. The first thing that all of them wrote was employ a maternity nurse. Or employ a doula, or make sure that you've got a good support system in place. But one of the big things is that they found excluded. They excluded, number one, because all of a sudden their wife was now having this one-on-one relationship with this baby, and they felt left out. Well, actually, that's easily rectifiable. They need to be changing the bum. They need to be, they can do skin to skin. They can be shushing the baby to sleep. Exactly that same. First 10 minutes, hold them, snuggle them. Exactly what others said. They can do all that. They can swaddle them and that. The other thing is they can cook the dinner if there's no one else doing it. They can do online food shopping. They can prepare snack trays for the mum. They can sit them. I think the most important thing a dad can do in those first few days home from the hospital is that you wake up and that you actually sit with your wife or your partner through actually helping them with the breastfeeding. And if you can do that, that's incredible for your relationship. It's that support. The other thing is that I'd encourage dads to write a note on the front door to say, please do not ring the doorbell. My wife is sleeping or the baby's feeding. The other thing is that they can do is set up two changing units, one upstairs in the nursery and one downstairs. So the mom, especially if she's had a C-section, she doesn't have to walk up and down the stairs. Dads can be very involved. And another thing is that dads told me their bugbear is not being shown where stuff is in the nursery. So because when you sleep deprived and you've got mood swings as a mom and you're always crying with baby blues, which is normal, and you tell them, you bark orders at them to go and fetch something in the nursery, and they go and they find something and they bring it to you, and you scream at them because it's the wrong thing. Well, moms, there is a solution. Before babies are born, or even after babies are born, take them into the nursery and say to them, this is all 0 to 3, this is baby, this is newborn, this is the nappies, this is where everything is. Label everything for them. It's important that they feel included, and those are some of the things. So yeah, and the other big thing between the two of you, don't sweat the small stuff. It's very important that you don't sweat the small stuff, because it's actually not great for your relationship. Okay, I hope that answered that, Krieber.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm going to wrap up now. It was lovely to have everybody join us. Thank you so much, Debbie, for everything, because I think it's absolutely impossible to cover every single thing with regards to these two huge topics. But we can revisit again at any time in our upcoming webinars, which we will let everybody know in advance and send another mail with the dates and times. I just wanted to mention on our actual Nurtury app itself that you can purchase multiple bundles of vitamins and all of that, because I think that's equally important, that you're having as much as you have them in your pregnancy, but having them post baby is also there. So with your omegas, and especially at the moment with this COVID and all of that, you need to make sure vitamin D and all the rest of it is there, and I'm sure you agree with that, Debbie. So
yeah, it's very important if you're breastfeeding. Sorry, you can actually also vitamin D is very important if you're breastfeeding, that they need to be getting vitamin D drops, and you need to be taking your supplement. That is important that you continue to take your supplement for 6 months. So there's bundles on the app that you can actually go on, and you can actually get bundles of your vitamins and your omega-3. And the other thing is it's very important that you look after yourself. The most important, you've got to look after yourself.
Yeah, I always say that's the analogy of having the oxygen mask on an aeroplane. They always say put it on yourself first before you help others, because if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be in the right state to be the best parent for your little one. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I hope that was useful. To be honest, it was extremely useful for me. It's a reminder of how special they are at that little age, when they first come into this world, and the time goes very, very quickly. So as much as it's hard, remember to enjoy all those little special moments in the first few weeks, and we shall be back. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.